Hey guys, you know we're fans of the In Search of Darkness documentary series, and now is your chance to order the upcoming film In Search of Darkness 1990 to 94. We have a link in the description of this episode. Check it out and order part 1 of the definitive 90s horror documentary today.
From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption and the original podcast about consumption. This week, we are talking about a movie, but before we get into that, we are going to introduce ourselves. My name's John. I might have already said that. And with me is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. His name is Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm not bad. I'm just polishing off my old 90s trophies and my diploma, my high school diploma. How are you doing?
You're polishing your diploma?
I am polishing my goddamn diploma, and don't ask me about it again.
Is it laminated?
It's engraved.
Engraved? Okay. In stone?
Yeah. Yep. It's engraved.
Yeah. That's how they did it back in the day? They just chiseled it into stone and gave it to you like that?
Well, it's in copper.
It's in copper?
It's a copper plate. I gotta keep taking this down the rabbit hole, so...
I'm not that much younger than you. I didn't really realize that I had gotten shafted with a paper diploma.
I am not diverging from this story. This is the story, John. Don't question it too much.
Okay.
I only have so many answers for you.
That's probably for the better. You watch anything interesting this week outside of our topic?
I watched a couple movies. I think.
Yeah?
Yeah. The first one I watched, I'm a big fan of crime movies, crime thrillers, movies like Blue Ruin, Cold in July, stuff like that, where it's kind of, you follow the crime as it's taking place. There's a lot of tension, and they're very tense. So I kind of fell across this movie called Cold Comes the Night, and it's Bryan Cranston and Alice Eve, and it's a movie where Bryan Cranston plays this. I'd never heard of it. I think it's from 2013. He plays this Russian mobster who's going blind, and he's been put on this job to transport money from one person to the next, and he ends up stopping in this motel that Alice Eve owns, and she needs to move out of this motel. And it's got that guy from what is that show called? Quarry? Did you ever watch Quarry?
Seinfeld. No. I don't even know what that is.
The guy looks like Tom Hardy. What's his face? Who's the Hardy brothers? What's that guy's name that everybody loves? Batman, Bane. What's that guy's name?
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy. Yeah, Tom Hardy. See?
Yeah.
See, Tom Hardy. See, yeah.
He has a brother?
Does he?
Or are you just making that up? I don't know. You said the Hardy brothers. Is there more than one of them?
No, I meant the Hardy brothers, the wrestlers.
Oh. Anyway,
but that guy looks like that guy. The guy that I'm talking about. So descriptive. I know. It's very good. But so she's kind of...
roaring start.
Yes. She's in cahoots with this police guy. And the police guy's crooked, and he like takes cars at the impound and he resells them. Well, he comes across the money, and then Bryan Cranston takes her hostage, and they together have to try and get this money back because she needs half the money. And it's just kind of this whole crime thriller, very tense kind of movie that was, it was okay. Bryan Cranston's Russian accent wasn't super convincing, and he's superhuman. It's like Wanted, he just has to... He can spin the bullet. He can make the bullet curve. No, he didn't do any of that stuff. But it just, the way that he's blind, they show from his perspective sometimes, and he can't see shit.
Just a blank screen?
No, it's like orange, and you can kind of see these like the light and the shadows and stuff. But he plugs people like a marksman. So
I don't know why when you said that he's blind and they show from his perspective, I imagine they just put like a blank black screen up for large periods of time.
That would be amazing. That would make the movie for
with
me.
The occasional room car.
Just one solid color, white or
just
black,
do the whole
like
movie that way. Let's just get an hour and a half of a black screen and a bunch of random sound effects. Maybe that guy falling down the stairs on a quick one to find the drop off.
There are
bowling pins.
There are movies that are especially aimed towards deaf people.
I'm sure.
So like Blackula. Oh my God. I almost, when I said that there are movies aimed towards, I almost, instead of deaf people, I almost said aimed towards black people, but aimed towards deaf people, like what? Deafula. There's a vampire like Dracula movie that's all deaf cast and everything. Anyways.
Have you seen this, or is this, I mean, I'm not saying seen of it. Have you actually watched this
I haven't
movie?
watched it. I've
Deafula?
seen of it, but I haven't watched it. But yeah, that movie was all right. It wasn't great, but it was something to watch. I think it was under 2 hours. And then I started watching a movie I didn't finish it yet. I have to revisit it because I didn't have time to watch it, the whole thing. But it's called God is a Bullet, and it's another crime thriller.
I haven't seen the trailer. I've seen the poster or whatever for it. That's usually all I really need to know if I want to. That one of mine is based off a poster. I'm like, well, that looks interesting. And that's basically how I'm judging if I want to watch something half the time.
Yeah, judge a book by its cover. You have to.
Well,
we've been trained from our video store days to judge books by their cover. But this is Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who played the Kingslayer on Game of Thrones, and he's a police officer whose ex-wife is murdered by this satanic cult, and his daughter's kidnapped, and they're trying to, well, you don't know what happened to the daughter, but they think that the satanic cult is trying to indoctrinate her into the cult. And he gets approached, the police officer, Nikolai Coster-Waldau, gets approached by this ex-cult member to try and find his daughter because she feels bad that, she's a reformed cultist, I guess. We got, Nikolai Coster-Waldau because I just feel like I need to say his name a few more times. And then we have January Jones is in it. Jamie Foxx is in it. The other person.
Nikolai who?
What?
Nikolai who?
Coster-Waldau.
Oh, okay. Jamie Foxx.
And Ethan Suplee has a small part in it because it's a schooner. But yeah.
God forbid we go a week without a fucking Kevin Smith reference, right?
Who?
So, exactly.
But this is directed, written in part. Yeah. We're doing the face and the expression. Written and directed by Nick Cassavetes, and it's based on a true story. But from all the Rotten Tomatoes stuff, it didn't look like it got very good ratings, and I don't know. I'm undecided. I think I'm about half an hour into this 2-hour plus movie.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's got an interesting cast at least, and I tend to like Jamie Foxx more than I ever. He's kind of like, hear me out on this. He's kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio in that whenever I see his name and on a title, I always think, oh, I don't want to watch that because I don't think I'm going to like it. But 9 times out of 10, when I do watch a movie that he's in, I find myself really liking it. So maybe I should get over that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've actually seen that they cloned Tyrone. He's in that. He's actually in most movies. He's pretty good.
No, that one.
That's that Netflix one I talked a while about. It's kind of blaxploitation ish.
Okay.
But yeah, besides that, I fell into this rabbit hole of this this YouTube channel. It's called 42nd Street Pete, and it's this old guy who's got to be in his late 50s or mid 60s, and he just talks about kind of the stuff that we talk about. He talks about movies, and he had some kind of, I don't know, I haven't quite been able to tell if he owned a video store or he worked for a distributor or something. So he has all these old school stories about old movies and stuff, and he reviews these movies. It's really like his videos are 7.5 minutes or so, and he talks about 1 or 2 movies per his little thing. He also talks about other shit too. So one of the titles is Back with Cocaine Bear and Evil Dead Rise. So he talks about those, and one of them was some older movies from the 40s. So one was Mad Monster plus The Crawling Hand and stuff like that. So he talks about really old movies.
Mad Monster Party, the one that's essentially like the old Christmas claymation movies, but it's got Dracula and Frankenstein and stuff in it.
I don't know. It's from 1942. I don't think he doesn't show clips or anything, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
That sounds about right as far as I only had this internet thing where I could look it up. Go ahead, continue.
Well, the other video, I keep calling it movies, Jesus Christ. The other video is how I started my own video store. So again, I guess he owned his own video store at one point, but they're just these kind of ramblings, and he talks about his past and these movies. It's definitely interesting. It's a good different perspective from, we're middle-aged, I guess, and he's on the older end, so he actually lived through it, and the stuff that we all talk about, or the stuff that we like to watch, was already out for 10 years by the time we discovered it. I really found a ton of really shitty 80s movies, horror movies that I want to watch that were on Peacock. And I sent you one earlier about during a Christmas vacation, some people discover that their kids turn into zombies and they burn people by touching them or something. I was like, this looks pretty good. This looks like something I could watch.
So before we go to that, Mad Monster Party came out in 1967, so it's a different movie. But for those listening that have young kids and want something fun and kind of throwbacky to watch, Mad Monster Party is a good way to go. It's got that CBS Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer look to it for the animation, but Halloween stuff. That one's fun. I heard Peacock really loaded up on their Halloween shit, and I emphasize the word shit for October. I don't know how much of that will stick around, but I don't have Peacock right now, and I'm kind of boycotting buying it or for the time being because I don't want to buy a streaming service to watch one football game and turn it off. But that title you sent me, that one, it's definitely going to get talked about again in about a month or so from when you hear this, maybe a little bit more than that. But it sounds like a good time. I'm on board for it.
That is called The Children, and the description is: a Christmas vacation turns deadly after gas leaking from a nuclear power plant turns children into zombies who burn anything they touch. Anyone they touch, sorry. That sounds amazing.
We haven't watched this yet, but are adults just immune? Is it kind of like once you get past puberty, you're fine? Gas
yeah, I don't know,
problem.
maybe. The other thing that I wanted to mention, the last thing that I watched I wanted to mention, is I fell into another YouTube channel called Real Stories, and they have all these, I think they're documentaries that were shown on like CBC or like international documentaries. And the one that I happened to fall upon that caught my interest was The Risky World of Hardcore Bingo, which was a gambling documentary. And it was, these people are
on CBC. So Canadian Hardcore Bingo.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if it was actually CBC, but they had Canadian accents, and I think they were in, I want to say Alberta or something, but I could be totally wrong.
That sounds like it. That sounds like pure gold right there. So
yeah, it was good. It was 47 minutes of gambling bliss and bingo.
Well, I didn't have that much time to watch that much stuff this week, mostly because I spent a good chunk of time at our friends over at Drafting Tables Oktoberfest, and then I went to see Miggy's final game for the Detroit Tigers. For those who don't know, Miguel Cabrera is a first ballot Hall of Famer, kind of a local legend, I guess you could say, around these parts, and he played his last game this past Sunday, October 1st, so I was watching that and having a good time there, but I did find time to catch a couple things. So I think it was last week when we talked about Tremors 2, and these might not be in order when you hear them. If you haven't heard the Tremors episode yet, and I'm right, that's where I brought it up. I went back and watched SLC Punk 2 because it kept popping up as a recommendation. I was like, that's fine. Let's see if I hate this as much the second time around as I did the first time around. And the answer is I hate it more. I didn't realize that Machine Gun Kelly is one of the main characters in the movie, which really annoys me.
When did that movie come out?
I don't have it in front of me. It's not that old. Let's see. That one came out in 2016. So I guess it's older than I thought. That's almost 10 years old, 8 years old at this point. But I mean, it's not good. It's another attempt at like a coming of age story, but the first one tells you from this really warped point of view and kind of focuses on something that, at least for me, is relatable. And I think for a lot of people, whether they grew up as a punk kid or not, can be relatable, because I think everyone goes through a phase of like, I'm the weird kid that doesn't fit in, or however you want to interpret that. This is just some whiny bitch kid that drives around in a car drinking Paps and, being obnoxious for an hour and a half. And then eventually Devon Sawa and a couple of the other people, basically everyone from the first movie except for Matthew Lillard, who, I don't remember your opinion of Matthew Lillard, but he's the only person you would want to come back from the first movie, but you get everyone else aside from him. So apparently he had better things to do, and I can't really blame him. But it's not a good movie. If you're going to watch it, just watch it to hate watch it and get mad at it. That's about the only thing it's good for. And then yesterday I rewatched Halloween 5, kind of just because it was on TV. I got a question for you.
Sure.
This is the question that came up in the house, and we'll throw it out here now because I think it's good, fodder. There's a scene in Halloween 5 where, dude's getting it on with a girl. They're in like in a barn on top of a haystack, and he's on top of her. Michael Myers comes up behind him and pitchforks him in the back while he's, doing his thing. The question is, at that point, do you keep going and try to finish, or do you just roll over and die like a bitch? Because I was told that, no, that pretty much ruins it. And I said, no, I think as a guy, you want to try to finish. You don't want to die and have blue balls, right?
I mean, if I'm answering honestly, I think I would just die. I think I would just roll over and die.
All right.
Being honest.
So the room's split on this. So for those of you listening, go ahead and feel free to answer that in the comments. If Michael Myers pitchforks you in the back while you're getting laid in a barn, do you just roll over and die, or do you try to finish the act? We want to hear from you on this. The other movie that I picked up, or I didn't pick up, that I watched that is worth checking out, it new movie. It came out this year. It's called The Passenger. This is the one that I was saying the cover on it, or the poster for it, was just kind of grimy enough to kind of make me interested in watching it. And I went into this 100% blind. I had no idea what this movie was about when I started watching it. Have you watched this yet?
Nope.
Okay. Do you want me to go into what it's about or leave it be?
You said it's called The Passenger?
Yeah.
Sure. Why don't you give me the brief synopsis?
I could just read it. Why don't I just read you the synopsis?
Why don't you just tell me the movie you want me to tell you about?
It's basically a movie about a guy who loses his shit and goes off the handle on like a very small killing spree and takes a guy kind of sort of hostage along with him. But in his head, you're not my hostage. I'm showing you that there's a big world out there and you can be, great and all this shit. And it's one of those types of movies, if that makes any sense. Like,
coming from a murderer, tell me all about how I can be great.
Bingo.
Sounds amazing. I gotta watch this.
It's fine. I mean, it's a Blumhouse movie, so take that for what it's worth. It's not a remake of anything as far as I know, so it's got that going for it. The lead actors in it are pretty good. It's got Johnny Rechold, I guess, and some other dude. Kyle Gallner. He's basically, you know him from Dirtbag, from Scream, and some other fucking kid. They give good performances. It's about an hour and a half long. It's not something that's going to be like, man, I really want more of that. But it's one of those movies like when it turns the volume up to 11, it's just crazy enough to keep your attention for everything else that happens in the movie. I don't know. It's worth watching in that sense. I'm sure it's on all the usual spots where you would get it on demand right now. Apple and, Vudu, Amazon, etc.
Voodoo.
We do.
You do.
Definitely worth $5 to give a watch, though. So
that thing's got 80% from the critics on Rotten Tomato and 66% from the audience. So
yeah, I wouldn't go that. I'd probably wait. You said 60% from the audience.
66.
That's probably right around where I'd put it. Like off hot dog scale, I'd probably give it around 6.5, just off the top of my head. So
okay,
it's not the kind of movie that I think I'm gonna revisit like ever. But I'm not mad that I spent an hour and a half watching it either.
Yeah.
So, good enough. It has some crazy shit in it. So we like crazy shit, right?
Can't go wrong with some crazy shit.
So let's talk about some crazy shit. We normally start these with a third-party review. However, this week's title, the movie Final Summer, which was released in 2022, it doesn't have any reviews that are worth reading. The reviews that are on here are all like fucking books, and my feelings of reading a book for these third-party reviews.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Should be a sentence or two.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. And there's literally no reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which is usually where I can find short ones, or anywhere else really. So we're going to go ahead and skip third-party review. And Sean, do you want to just tell us the plot of Final Summer?
Yeah, so the plot and the storyline are the same on IMDb. It's really short and to the point. It says, in the aftermath, it doesn't say that. What it says is, in the aftermath of a tragedy at a summer camp, a group of camp counselors find themselves fighting for their lives against a masked killer.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
Shit happens.
That is pretty fair. That's pretty much what it is.
I don't want to go as far as to say that I went into this with high expectations. Like, that's probably not the right wording, because I try not to get my expectations up for really anything that I watch. I did really want to see this movie. Like, I know I've been talking to you about wanting to see this for at least a year now, if not a little bit longer. The art that's on this, from if I remember right, from BP's interview with the director, was done by Creepy Duck Designs, which he does some amazing stuff. And this is a really fantastic poster. And like we mentioned, you want to get me and or you interested in a movie. You have a good poster, you're probably going to sell it right there. This movie absolutely nailed that. This movie went the hyper indie route. This is a Kickstarter funded movie. I don't know if this is the total budget on it, but we're looking at a movie that was Kickstarted and funded with about roughly 99 backers and that pledged roughly $16.5 thousand to this movie. Again, I don't know if there was anything separate from that to kind of help fluff the budget a little bit, or if that was the budget, or obviously there's got to be some things that outside of like promoting it and so on that goes into that too. So this movie is a hyper indie film, and well, that should give you a bit of an idea of what kind of movie we're going to be talking about. Did you have any preconceived notions about this, or other than me babbling about it ahead of time?
No, honestly, kind of going back to what you said, looking at the poster, I was like, oh, this could be pretty cool because the artwork is really awesome. It's basically got not a silhouette, but a figure with a skull mask on, which looks like maybe blood splatter or something on it. And he's carrying an axe with a moon behind him, and it just says Final Summer. So the thing that it didn't say in the IMDb storyline or the plot is that this movie's supposed to take place in 1991 at a summer camp. And basically everything that the movie is trying to kind of encapsulate, I think, is supposed to be capturing this early 90s vibe. Like, there aren't cell phones. The characters don't have a way to communicate really with the outside world. Obviously, no internet, no cell reception, any of that stuff. And the movie starts off with this kid, basically a camp attendant, a kid, who passes away. And you don't really know what happened. It's not really explained how the kid died. You just know he died. Actually, the movie starts with a story where these kids are all around a campfire, and they're telling stories about the camp groundskeeper, Warren Copper, who they say, killed these people or whatever. And of course, it's always the groundskeeper that's the mysterious one or whatever. And what ends up happening are these people around the fire get knocked off, or at least two of them do. I think that they show two of them relatively on camera get knocked off.
They do an almost shot for shot retake of the Jason intro in the reboot of Friday the 13th. When you've seen that one, right?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yep.
Have you not?
I have, in the theater.
As you should. The shot where he's basically swinging the axe and about to, right before it lands on a person, and they have that kind of tilted looking upward shot on him. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's almost the exact same shot that you get in that Friday the 13th. But this intro and really a lot of this movie is just super heavy on the homage to the entire Friday the 13th series. There's tons of hints of the burning in here, and then little like splashes of Sleepaway Camp in here too. Like your big camp slasher franchises. I don't know if the burning's a franchise. There's only the one in the remake. Does that count franchise or
no?
Whatever.
I'd say that's the remake's more. When you go for a remake, maybe that's more of a money grab than a franchise.
Yeah, but I mean those. I would say if you were going to put the pillars of camp slashers on there, those are the three titles that you really want to have in there. And they're very heavily referenced, or like I said, not referred to, but very heavily homaged throughout this whole movie. And the opening scene feels very much so like that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a camp slasher kind of open. And then they tell you 5 years later, the rest of our story is going to take place. Like I said, a young kid dies, and his uncle comes, or is it hits his grandfather, comes to, basically, I see him that he's laid out and he's dead, and that happens to be Warren Copper, who the rest of the movie you're kind of unsure as to Warren's motives, but they announce that the camp's going to have to close because they've had all these tragedies over the years. They've had people have died at the camp or whatnot, and they're telling all the counselors, all the people working there, they need to start packing it up because they're going to be selling the place. I think they're going to be selling all the equipment and stuff. So they're kind of gathering it up. And the movie takes place the night that the kid was killed or that he died. And it's implied that that Warren Copper is going to be back for revenge. So the rest of the movie's kind of them, all the counselors being chased down by this masked person, who I like the touch that the killer is like fallible. They're like, they can be injured, they can be knocked down. It's a person. There's no pretense that this is some kind of supernatural killer.
These kids clearly can stand up to him too. There's several spots where they fight back against this killer, and they don't get the best of him necessarily, but they definitely make headway on him. Like he's not. It's not like when they go and like hit Jason with a 2x4 and he just like cuts him in half or something.
Yeah, he's definitely injured or injurable. He's not invincible. And a few of the counselors get better shots on him than others, but a lot of the times I was thinking like the counselors are all grouped together. There's a few times where they split apart, two will go this way, two will go that way, but some of the times when they see this killer, he's just out in the open and they are cowering in the cabin or whatnot, and there's power in numbers, right? So why wouldn't they just go and confront this guy together as a group? A lot of times they just cower and they don't really defend themselves, but they defend themselves perfectly fine when they're actually attacked or there's one scene in particular that I'm thinking of where they're kind of helping somebody who got gravely injured, and they're helping him back to, I think, a campsite, or they're trying to get him somewhere, and the killer comes out, and the one that's acting as the nurse really starts, that I think that's the character that gets the best of the killer most of the time until they don't. And the time I'm watching it, I'm like, why doesn't the other person come back and try to restrain this person, or I don't know, do something? They just they're really strong when they're one-on-one, which is really weird. It should be realistically, it should be the other way.
Well, I would actually say this movie I don't know if it relies on, but it does lean heavily on the trope of these characters that aren't Warren Copper. Like they're very heavy-handed on the trope that they make really dumb fucking decisions through a good portion of this movie. And there's times where that's okay, because let's be real, this is, intended to be a camp slasher movie. These aren't exactly movies that you want to go in and have to overthink the storyline. So there's some level of like, hey, characters making dumb decisions can make things entertaining. That's how you lead to some really goofy interactions in movies like this. That being said, I don't think this really panned out that way in this film. I think more often than not, it just kind of leaves you as an audience, more confused, like, why the fuck are they doing that? Because it doesn't really have that payoff, whether it's they get like a really good kill, or they get a really good like comedic like response where they, I don't know, kick them in the dick or something like that and run away. Just something, to kind of take the almost slapstick dumb aspect of it and kind of give you a little bit more out of it.
Yeah, and a lot of things that happen in this, like you were saying, were homages to Friday the 13th. There are little touches of things in the movie. Like there's a scene where one of the kids, or adults, I mean, they're kids to me, but one of the adults, one of the counselors, one of the workers, I guess, pulls out, the killer's out in front, and he's kind of waiting for a confrontation, and he goes and he grabs like a hockey mask, and he's like, all right, I'm ready, let's go, let's do this. And there's a scene where they're kind of talking about the camp, which happens earlier in the movie, and it's a painting. The woman, it's like an older lady, basically. The old not the groundskeeper, but the owner of the camp is an older woman, and she kind of points to a picture of her dad, and it's Tom Atkins, a painting of Tom Atkins, clearly.
Did you notice he's in the credit for that?
I thought I read something about that, but I didn't notice that in there.
I saw it because there's a post-credit scene. I watched it a second time because I found out there's a post-credit scene, and I caught the credits just at that part where it says Tom Atkins. I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool, I guess. Wonder if he gets paid for that. So
yeah, I mean, it's totally his likeness, 100%.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's kind of a nice, I like that touch. I think that's a cool little like nod to, I mean, you're playing your hand as far as what kind of horror movies you like if you put Tom Atkins in there, but I don't have a problem with that. You're kind of right in the wheelhouse that I like to be in.
Yeah, who you're trying to capture with that little tidbit.
Right. Do we want to keep going on the story before we go on to some of the other stuff with this?
Well, one part that I was really confused about that was a story device, but also a character kind of building thing that happens is one of the main counselors is Lexi, and she's kind of the head female final girl kind of character that, they pretty much from the beginning, they're trying to, when the kid dies, the kid is kind of under her care, her and another guy, and the police are there and they're trying to get some kind of, not necessarily a confession, but they need to get the story from her. And then the owner woman basically says, Lexi, I need your report by the end of tonight or tomorrow or whatever on what happened in this case.
She's the Pamela Voorhees proxy, right?
Yeah, the owner woman. I'm going to call her owner lady. But so Lexi is...
I call her knockoff Pamela Voorhees.
Okay, well,
that's okay.
That's acceptable. But Lexi, there's this storyline with her, and it's about her brother. And from what I can gather, her brother got hit by a car, and she kind of claims responsibility, like she feels responsible for it because she was something. And I think that's the part the issue that I have with that whole kind of subplot is that it's more confusing than anything else. Like talking about it, me saying it out loud, oh, she feels responsible for her brother being killed in these flashbacks that don't have anything to do with the rest of the story, except, maybe some kind of PTSD or whatever. And which is not nothing, but, I don't want to just write it off like PTSD or whatever. but it kind of goes along that because you don't learn anything.
For the purposes of this kind of movie, it's
you don't learn anything.
Whatever.
Yeah, and that's like the one thing where they keep flashing back and they'll do these like the color will be different. It'll have a lens flare or something where it's brighter. It's a brighter scene. When this comes up, it kind of has that flashback, quote unquote, quality to it. My big complaint with that whole thing is it doesn't really fit in the movie, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like I said, you understand that the kid is killed because they don't show it so much as they just kind of show somebody in like a striped shirt or something, and a car drives up to him, and then it like fades to white, or I don't know what it does. But I feel like that we have this Lexi character, we realize that she's like the strong final girl, but we don't need that extra backstory to know this about her. There's so much other stuff that they show her in the movie, and this is so pinned on her with this whole responsibility thing.
I actually don't mind the cast in this. I mean, we do get Thom Mathews in this, which if you're into this genre, you probably know him from either Friday the 13th, 6, or Return of the Living Dead, or any number of things. He's all over the place. And I actually, one of the things I really like about Thom Mathews is he does a lot of indie projects like this, which is cool. I don't know that, I mean, frankly, I don't know that people are like beating down his door to get him into a lot of big budget movies. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I hope they are. But either way, I think it's cool that he's kind of goes back to his roots of indie horror films and shows up in these on a pretty regular basis. He's really the only recognizable name, I would say, that you're going to see in this in an actual acting role outside of Tom Atkins. There's a lot of young, again, kids to us, but a lot of younger actors, and I don't really have a problem with anyone in this movie as far as acting or their performance or anything like that. There's some things that could be fleshed out quite a bit more, and a lot of that's going to fall onto script writing, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with ultimately what could be done. And when I say what could be done from a budgetary time constraint, all that type of thing, I think for what this cast was given, they did about as good as a job as you could want out of this. And having seen tons of indie films like this, there's nothing in this that makes you say, good God, get this person off of my fucking TV screen. Where some of these indie films, there's people in there, they're like, who the fuck thought it was a good idea for you to put you on a camera? And there's no one like that in this film at all.
I would agree. I think that while a lot of these people don't have a lot of credits to their name, they do a pretty good job, all things considered. I think you've prefaced it a few times by saying indie film, and we've talked about the budget, and this was kickstarted, and that it's not a blockbuster, it's not a AAA movie. But I will say there are a scene or two where it looked very, the way that the lines were delivered seemed very one take. Like it seemed like this is my take. And this is it. We could probably refine this and maybe make it a little bit better. And the scene I'm thinking about in particular is the scene between Lexi and Pete, who Pete's like this guy who's pined after Lexi and he has this crush on her, but he's not, he doesn't want to, he's never come out to say that he's got this crush on her. And he has this incident where he kind of like gets knocked out of the movie for a little bit because he literally gets knocked out and the killer can't find him. And Pete comes back and he's like, oh, he's tired and he's hurt because he's got knocked out. And she like flies off the handle about this, I don't know, him complaining that he's hurt. And she's like, I've been running this whole time, I've been XYZ. And I don't know, the line that's delivered, the way that it's delivered and like the actions that she does are just really, I don't know. I was like, you could have done another take on this one. That's the only like specific gripe I have, but it's not it. Other than that, I think that, like you said, with the cast and not having a lot of credits and probably not having a lot of experience, it is pretty well acted. Like the characters are pretty believable. The one other thing that I would complain about is early in the movie, there are a lot of these, I don't know, fake out kind of scares where they talk about something and they tell some spooky thing and they're like, and he's right behind you. And it gets like all these characters a few times, and by I think it's at least 2 or 3 times it happens. You're just like, no one's convinced that this is actually a scary thing. So can we stop with this?
That felt more like a throwback to me too, like especially it made me think of Friday the 13th too, when they start the movie with them sitting outside the campfire, and then what's his name, Ted or whatever, the dickhead comes like running through in his underwear with the wolf mask on. And I was like, okay, so that's why I guess I kind of forgave it because it
Gave
was
it a
like,
pass.
it's another, yeah. But you're right. It does after the second or third time. You're like, okay, we've seen that bit now. How did you feel about Warren Copper's look in the movie? Like the mask, the get up, and all that. I mean, they give you an origin for the mask, which, but
I think it's a cool look for sure. It's very creepy, very spooky. It's basically a skull printed on like a nylon pullover hood or something.
so there's moments in the movie. So I like the look itself. Like it's what sold me on wanting to watch this is a look at this mask. There's moments in this movie where I feel like and there's a scene where they're in like a kitchen or something like that, and he's kind of hiding against the wall, and like the way it's shot, it doesn't look like a nylon mask anymore. It looks like either like a hard plastic or maybe like a rubber mask at this point. But there's moments in this movie where it looks kind of like a mashup of the skull mask from Halloween 3 and the Fiend from the Misfits and the Crimson Ghost and that. And when it looks like that, I love the way it looks. It looks more crafted, where the scenes where it looks like it is just a nylon mat. Well, it is what it's supposed to be, a nylon mask that just got pulled over someone's face. I feel like that looked less thought out, I guess. I would have liked to have seen, we'll get into what we would have liked with this in a second here, but I would have liked to have seen the mask just have a little bit more craft into it, just because the scenes where it does look like it was something that was more painstakingly created, as opposed to just like, I picked it up off the ground and like, I guess I'm wearing this now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it lends, not that this needs credibility, but it lends credibility to the idea of this character and being more the mythos of the character, I guess, and less like, okay, well, if he was in Detroit and he found a blue ski mask outside of Ford Field, would that be what he picked up and decided to start wearing? I don't know. So I get it, and it works as far as like being a creepy look, but I would like to see that kind of flushed out, and it almost leaves the idea of you could have like another person walking around as like a copycat, or just like you've seen this in other movies, the Ben Tramer of the Final Summer world, where he's wearing,
I was going to say, think of Michael Myers in Halloween 2.
The same get up, but he's not the same guy. That would have been a cool little ad to me. But I do like the look of it overall. And again, I like the look of this whole movie. Like, again, it's your typical camp slasher vibe. It's dark. There's campfires. It's got a lot of blue overtones. Occasionally it gets that warmer, like brown kind of fall feel. But from a cinematic standpoint, it looks absolutely fine from start to finish, aside from some spots where the shots get a little blurry and out of focus. I don't have any idea what the actual like scope or the feel of the movie.
I was just going to touch back on the mask part, and I thought and when I say nylon mask, I like the look of it. I thought it was fine. I really enjoyed it. I was actually like, where can I get a mask like that? Because that's pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of the technical complaints, and we don't generally get into technical kind of stuff, but the one thing I wanted to point out here is watching this movie, a lot of scenes to me felt like they were kind of out of focus. They really used that anamorphic kind of look and it kind of fits the 90s vibe, where you shine a light at the lens and it has those super wide lens flares, they're really like the Spielberg or J.J. Abrams kind of feel, where they'll do a lot of anamorphic lighting, lens flares and stuff. I feel like they kind of went a little over the top on that. And again, I understand the choice because it's 90s, and that was kind of like a 90s thing, early 90s kind of thing in cinema, was to use those kind of lenses and whatnot. But I think it
Till J.J. Abrams came and fucked it up for everyone.
I just think it's like at the detriment of some of the movie, because using that anamorphic look, it's hard to nail like sharp focus, or at least some kind of, I don't know, some kind of look. It just makes it look blurry, and like you have something like, oh, am I not watching? Is there something wrong with my TV? Like it's not clear on this one particular scene. That's really my only technical gripe. And it's, I'm no filmmaker, right? We're talking on a podcast, so
well, right.
Never made a movie, but it's an interesting choice, and I can understand why they went with it. It just feels kind of, I don't know, the out of focus kind of scenes where they use it make it look really muddy and hard to, no pun intended, focus on the action when you're concerned more about, is my TV working okay? Am I watching? Is this like 1080? Am I watching the right thing? So that would be my one kind of big technical complaint on the movie.
So we mentioned there is a teaser scene at the end of this, and they're already talking about making a sequel to this movie. I for one, I absolutely want to see a sequel to this movie. I want to see this movie go to the next step. I'll save my thought on how I want to see that happen here, but what do you want to see from this? Do you want to see a franchise come out of this, or do you want to see this continue the story, or like it? Where does this leave you before we get into like talking about how we like our overall thoughts on the movie? Like just briefly, because this is very much so an open-ended movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where do you want to see them take this?
I mean, it's no secret. I think if we go over lots of the movies that I talk about, I'm not the biggest fan of sequels. If the movie doesn't need a sequel, why don't we just end it? But that being said, obviously the movie sets up for another movie or like you said, a franchise down the road. I could see this turning into a franchise. I think that this is a really good kind of first pass on a movie, but I would like to see how it evolves from here. And I would like to see maybe more of building the character, building the mythos, building why this is. I need more of a reason as to why this is a sequel, or why there would be sequels to it. And I feel the same way. And so this, not to make it come across like I'm picking on the movie, I said the same thing about Terrifier. We have Terrifier 2. It's like now the biggest thing. Everybody talks about clowns and Art the Clown, and everybody knows my stance that's listened to this podcast on clowns and Art the Clown and all that stuff. If they can expand the mythos of the character, the killer, and I won't call him Warren Copper, but the killer, whoever the killer is, if they could expand upon that and give a reason as to why this character is like this or what the motivation is behind the character, I'm all for it. But if it's just making another movie to make another movie to cash in, I mean, again, I didn't put any money up for this movie. Cash in all you want. I don't care. But I'm saying if it's just going to be a movie where you're going to do the same thing again, I don't know if I don't know if I'd be watching that one because I've already seen it. I've seen this movie.
So I might disagree with you a little bit. Hear me out on this, I guess. I said that a couple times in this episode, but I actually would like to see this movie kind of take the Evil Dead 2 route in that I don't want to see like a straight up like remake of this, but I would love to see this movie kind of flesh out the ideas that it had, or a sequel for this, flesh out the ideas that were in this first movie, refine them, and frankly, just really turn up the gore machine to 11. My biggest, I don't want to call it a gripe, but my biggest like thing that like...
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
The point that I was kind of making, I agree with you. So we're not... If this was to be made again, like remade, like you said, like an Evil Dead kind of thing, where they can kind of get a bigger budget, this is like a proof of concept kind of thing that they can make this movie, and then refine it and make it more focused and make it a little bit more coherent, I'm all for it. If they do like a big budget remake of this or a bigger budget remake of this, maybe twice the budget, and they can pull a rabbit out of a hat and make it, they really cross their T's and dot their I's and they make it hyper focused. I would watch that too, just so that's out there.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see with it. And again, I'd like to see, I mean, so many of the kills that happen off camera. So many of the things that let's be upfront here with it. When you say this is a camp slasher movie, the one thing you want to see above everything else is creative, over the top, gory kills. And there's not a lot of that in this film. And there's reasons for that. And I understand that. I'm really not trying to knock the movie for that because, again, like you said, I didn't make a movie. I haven't even tried to attempt something like this. I love the fact that this movie or any movie like this exists because it shows that there's still people out there trying to make this kind of, content, which is awesome. But I would love to see this kind of take that. I don't think comparing it to Terrifier and Terrifier 2 is necessarily fair because that's so over the fucking top. And the first one's devoid of any type of story. This at least puts a storyline in there for you to follow. It is cohesive and it tells a narrative on it. But to be able to really just kind of amp this one up and maybe instead of Final Summer 2, get like Final Summer like 1.5, where you take the bones of this story and flush it out and just make it, everything that you could possibly imagine. I don't know what the budget would be to make something like that. I would love to see that. I think that could launch into whether that's a franchise, a trilogy, whatever that wants to be. But I think it's set up to do that. I really hope for not just for the director, but for everyone who's backed this film that we get a chance to see that. Because I think these characters and this killer or this slasher really has a chance to do something special. I'd love to see that kind of push to that next step. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and break out some hot dogs?
Fire up the grill, John. Tell us about it.
I enjoyed the majority of this movie. I enjoy seeing indie films that take a concept and really try to do what they want to do and achieve something that, again, you have to respect people taking their first step into their filmmaking career. This is John Isberg's Iceberg. I think it's Isberg. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. This is his first feature film, as far as I can tell. He doesn't have anything else that's a feature film listed. He has a couple other like television and shorts that are listed on his IMDb. There's great ideas here. I like the camera work in this. I like the way this is shot. I do like the characters. The only thing that you could really say is it is a movie that, as much as I enjoy all those things, there's spots where it feels that it's limited and kind of falls flat because of that. And again, it's the kind of movie you watch and you can see like there is a reason why these things are that you want out of this are missing. I'd be willing to bet if we asked him, he'd probably say I wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and for whatever reason couldn't. But this is the kind of movie that, you know, of all the movies that are out there, this is the kind of movie I feel like you absolutely should be giving your $5 or $10 to go see, because that's how we get the next thing to pop up and become the next. If you want new slasher movies, if you want new horror movies, if you want new ideas, supporting movies like this is the way to get it. So I think this is a fun movie, a good first outing into this presumable series. And I'd give it a solid 6 fan-backed hot dogs out of 10.
So I agree with some of the things that you said. I do think that...
You son of a bitch. Only some?
I do, yeah. And I'll tell you why. So I agree with some of the things you said, and I do kind of admire the chutzpah to get out and do a movie on your own, right? Again, not something I've ever done. I've filmed videos, but it's never been on the scope of a movie. That being said, I would like to see if there is a sequel or like we talked about before, like a bigger budget remake. I'd like to see the story focused a little bit more. I think the story as it stands in this movie the story that is there is very hard to follow. The things don't really make a whole lot of sense. There are some portions of it that almost feel like they're out of sequence, but it's not quite that extreme. What I would like to see is the 90s part of it not used as just a gimmick. Like, we don't really see, there's nothing besides no cell phones. There's never any mention of anything that is 90s related other than, you know, a few people wearing Smashing Pumpkins t-shirts or like a band t-shirt or something. There's nobody's really dressing necessarily era appropriate. So even that part, you know, I guess we have a few things, but, you know, not all that much. I think that it would have been nice, and again, I understand why we probably didn't see a lot of it, but this being a slasher movie, there is not much slashing that goes on. People get killed, but you don't see any of it. There's a few things where there are like wounds and stuff that you do get to see, but overall, you don't really get a really good picture of I don't know, it's just kind of, you're lacking that slasher kind of vibe to it. I do appreciate, again, that the killer is not this supernatural threat, and I like the fact that it's a person. It kind of has almost this Scream 1 kind of vibe to it in that respect, where these are like real human beings, and I won't say anything else about it because I don't want to spoil the story. I would just like to see a more refined version of this come out, either as, again, a bigger budget remake, maybe a sequel, and they can kind of focus a little bit more. For me, because of all those kind of little nagging things, the technical things with the out of focus kind of shots, or the over, you know, just personal preference on the anamorphic stuff, I got to go with 4 extension cords out of 11 hot dogs.
All right. So let's get to our question of the week. This was a big one. Our question of the week was pretty straightforward. It was, what is your favorite throwback horror? And you guys really showed up to answer this one.
Be reading for a while.
Yes. So on Twitter, who is pretty much butt-fucked our engagement by doing whatever they're doing, we have one response. It's from the You Run podcast, and Scott over there responded and said, the Sharknado franchise from 3 onwards is the absolute best. And I actually asked for clarification on this because I've watched the first Sharknado movie, and I remember seeing like a bunch of them, but it was always like around 2 a.m. after a certain point of the evening, you know, so I don't really remember that much of them.
Sure.
He swears that these movies after 3 and on are fantastic. So I guess I'm going to have to revisit them. That was it for Twitter. And then on Instagram, we have a response from the You Run podcast. And they said just flat out, it is definitely not Cocaine Bear. So for those who don't know, they infamously, both Scott and Mark, refused to score Cocaine Bear out of their rating system because they hated it so fucking much. So that's all the responses we got this week on the wonderful Ask the Audience segment. So we'll do that better next week, hopefully, as long as someone sees this and gets to respond to it. That would be ideal. Do you have a favorite throwback horror movie, Sean?
I'm like racking my brain to think of a throwback horror movie. I think the thing that I think of off the top makes me think more of remake horror movies. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's totally off. I would say The Blob has that kind of retro feel to it. It's 80s, late 80s in a way, obviously late 80s filmmaking, but it's also captures a lot of feelings of the original, the 50s, the 60s, what is it, 60s? Early 60s version? I don't even know when the original Blob came out.
54?
58. I had to look it up. 58. It's still...
That was close.
Yeah, it still has a lot of those elements.
By Price is Right rules, I won because I was closest without going over.
Without going over. Hey, I can appreciate that. Being a lover of all things Price is Right, the Bob Barker era, as proof of my vacation. But yeah, I would go with The Blob. I don't know. Is that a right answer? Am I in the right ballpark there?
Sure. I kind of rack my brain the same way with it. I don't know that I would say this is my favorite because like you, I kind of don't really understand the question. Maybe that's why we didn't get a ton of responses this week.
We asked the question and we don't understand.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out there a movie that I watched more recently that I had fun with. I enjoyed Murder Size, which is definitely got like an 80s throwback vibe to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you watched it yet? I don't remember.
I haven't
if you
watched
said you
it
actually
yet, no.
watched it.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So for those who don't know, and this will be an upcoming month-long thing that we're going to torture you with, there was a segment of the 80s that focused heavily on horror movies and aerobics. And this movie kind of plays on that kind of heavily. It's not set in the 80s, but it might as well be. So it definitely, I feel like, fits the bill of that throwback vibe. And A&P Films is another pair of independent filmmakers, so they're another good group to interact with, to talk about, and to support their stuff. That is free on Tubi right now as well. So we love Tubi. So I would say check that out.
Yeah, when I was talking about Peacock earlier, I was looking through the horror section on there, and that's like a big thing that I've noticed is, they have those movies that are authentic 80s, 70s through 90s movies that are authentic old school horror movies, right? In that kind of wheelhouse that I like to live in. But then there are also movies from like the mid 2010s to current where they have poster or artwork that really gives the vibe of like, this is like one of those 70s, 80s, 90s movies. And a couple of them looked so good that I was like, oh, when is that one from? I've never heard of that. And 2016. Okay, I got it. I see what you're going for.
Welcome to the world of the bullshit that I watch.
Yes.
Or some of it anyway.
Right.
I mean, I live in that 80s, 90s, 70s field that you do too, but I dabble into the current stuff because when I see a poster that says Attack of the Killer Donuts, I don't care if it's from 2016. That piques my interest. I
have to say it kind of turns me off because I'm so conditioned to think that the digital era where digital filmmaking looked like digital filmmaking, like what you're used to seeing on
absolutely
digital cameras. It's like, man, I don't like that look.
Anyway, final summary. It is available now on the usual spots where you can rent a movie. You can check it out on Amazon, Vudu, YouTube,
Apple TV,
TV. Your normal spots where you can rent a movie. This is absolutely worth your $5 to $10 if you want to rent it or buy it. Please do. If you do rent it and watch it, share it on social media. Tell them that Dewey Pod Monster told you to watch this movie. That would actually be a cool thing because, someone will hear it. But if you do that, we can follow you and we can respond to you. We will do that through our various social media outlets. You can find us on all the social medias at Dewey Pod Monster. If you search us, you will absolutely find us. Or you could follow us on our site, which is Crap.Town, our YouTube page, which is also at Dewey Pod Monster. Or you could follow us on any platform where you can download podcasts, such as Apple, Spotify, and the likes. Aside from that, Sean, where can people find you?
Yeah, if you're interested in my Michigan beer travels, my Michigan beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can also find me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy.
So do that, drink a beer, watch Final Summer, and then tell us what you thought about it. And we'll be back next week with some new kind of shit. Cheers.
Bye-bye. explain this, but movies like Blue Ruin, Green Room, I know they're both movies about colors in the titles. They're both by the same person, actually. But movies like that, like, shit, let me look up the other name of the movie that I really like. I don't know. I'm going to edit a bunch of this shit.
Red Toilet.
What's that?
Red Toilet.
Red Toilet. I enjoy the Red Toilet movie. What
Orange
is,
Bathtub.
like, what's that, 3 Billboards on the Way to whatever, Orange County? Like, those type of movies. Kind of crime, kind of, stuff like that. Jesus Christ. Should we just
Crime
start
Road
over?
Trip.
Like Road Trip? Yeah. Like,
you're the one who edits it. You let us know.
all right, hold on. I'm looking this up.
All right.
What's that guy's name that was on Dexter? Philip Michael Thomas? Seymour?
Michael C. Hall.
Michael C. Hall.
I believe. Maybe that sounds wrong now.
No, you're right. I gotta find these movies that I like so much that I can't remember what the fuck they're called.
I like Michael C. Hall generally, but I like Dexter, so that's probably why. Well, I like the first 4 seasons of Dexter. After that, it's up for debate.
He's not in any of these movies.
Michael C. Hall?
Yeah, that's not who was in it. Okay, let's see.
Why don't you just look up Green Room and go to the director?
No, I know that's not the same guy.
God, thank God we're not recording this live. So.
See?
Or we're not live streaming this.
Streaming live streaming it.
Whatever. Hey, fuckers, watch us look up this movie that we don't even know the title.
Yeah, but I really like it a lot.
Yeah,
I'm never gonna find the name of this fucking movie. Can I look up crime like tags on Plex?
I have no idea.
Fucking A. Categories, here we go. Crime. Hey, look at that. Crime.
Criminy.
Mort Crim. Okay, I got it. All right. So, what have I been watching?